So we are taking the 20th verse. Ekam sarvagatam vyoma bahirantar yatha ghati nityam nirantaram brahma sarvabhut gane tatha. Literal translation. So we can do the literal translation as just one and the same all-pervading space exist within and without a jar, so the eternal, everlasting, real self exists in the totality of things. As the jar is pervaded inside and outside by the same space, so does my real self is pervading outside and inside in everything. That is the 20th verse. So what he is doing, what the master is doing, master is saying, uh, you see that is one of the most striking thing in the Eastern wisdom. You ask something and master answers totally different. What the seeker was asking in the very first verse, Katham Jnanam Apnoti, how the knowledge of the reality is attained, how the dispassion is achieved, and how the freedom or awakening takes place. Now, these are the three questions. And if you find the answers in all the 19 verses, they are totally as it appears, they are just, he is answering totally a different thing. Why is that is so? So my master answered me one day that he says that I always answer you. I do not answer your questions. Your question comes from your mind and intellect because of the conflict and the confusion, because of the ignorance. So the master used to say that I see your level, mental state, your level of awareness, and then I start answering you. And that is what he is answering. So in every verse, you see that just even a very negligible reference to these questions. So this is what is striking and most important thing. So what happens if you are not a seeker? Then you reject the master. He is not answering my question. Where is the real self? Can you prove it by experiment? You see, that's a wrong question to ask. But still the master answers. So masters who does not want to come down when realized, that is another part. So this jana, this master Astavakra does not want to come down at the level of the seeker. But fortunately, the seeker, the king, also is the highest level of seeker. So a perfect union takes place in this text. So great seeker, second point, the great seeker always asks the big questions. Now I have an anxiety. Can you tell me something about meditation to manage my anxiety? You are still not a seeker. It will help. So you see the questions, how the knowledge of the real self is attained, how the dispassion, he knows that we need dispassion in the mind, in the intellect, to awaken to the real self. And then he is saying how the awakening takes place. Two things are required. Shraddha means the faith, and intellectual inquiry, holding in the mind what you are holding in the mind, the knowledge of the real self. That the king held of is one, that is what is the faith, and second is the intellectual inquiry. So I can rephrase it: belief pending inquiry. That is the right phrase to use in the entire journey of Eastern wisdom. That prevents you to follow any cult, dogma, belief, religion, etc. So we don't talk about the God and religion and cult and spirit. It's a pure inquiry. So now the 20th verse, what he says, Ekam Sarvagatam Vyoma. What a beautiful verse the master is saying. He is saying that what exactly is the real self? It is all pervading, it is like all pervading space. Is your mind going there? I am the space means I am all pervading. Not only I am all pervading, I am pervading in my house, but I am pervading in your house also. Just see that. Oh, I am inside this body, but I am also inside all the bodies that I am seeing. You see, expand that. This is what the master is saying. Ekam sarvagatam vyoma bahir antaryatha ghate. Ghate simply means any object. So, which object? Whether it's a body or solar system, everywhere. I am pervading everywhere. It is not the ego sense what the Sam is talking about. So it is beyond that I, which is all pervading, nityam, nirantaram, nityam. Nityam means eternal. Nirantaram, there is a continuity. Time space continuum in physics. Brahma, real self, sarva bhuta gani tada tatha. So now he is giving an example of the jar. The space is outside and the space is inside. And if I'm an all pervading space, it means I am not the body. I am not the breath. I am not the intellect. I am not the ego sense. I am none of these thoughts. There is a great master, Shankaracharya, who speaks a lot. What he says clearly, what happens when you are in a deep meditative state. Mano buddhir ahankara chittani naham nacha shrotra jivhai nacha ghrana netre nacha vyoma bhumir na tejo na vayu chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. So how Shankara explains the same thing. So you see, do you remember that there are three words I use in the mode of practice in Eastern wisdom? One is sadhana. Sadhana means that first I do the discernment, means I separate what is real and what is not real. And then I drop from my mind the knowledge of what is not desired. And I accept what is desired. So this is what this verse says. Mano buddhir ahankara chittani naham. He says, I'm not the mind, I'm not the intellect, I'm not the memory, I'm none of these five elements that makes our body. Mano buddhir ahankara chittani naham. Nacha shrotra jivhai nacha ghrana netre. He says, I'm none of these five sense organs. None of these five motor organs. Then who am I? He says, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. I am one pure consciousness which is all pervading. That continues all the time. So there are two things again, remember. One is a tremendous fade. And what does it mean by the fade in Eastern wisdom? I'm holding on to the real self. I'm holding the mind on to the real self. Just consider the mind as a dog and the leash is the real self. Mind, real self. I want to know the real self. I want to know the real self. Non-verbal appreciation in the mind, and then you inquire. This is, so both elements are together. So once we inquire with that faith, what happens? The mind reaches to the highest state of, you can say, the state of emptiness. The intellect reaches to the state of clarity and conviction. In that state, the mind becomes the mirror, and that mirror reflects our real self. This is what the 20th verse. See, all the 20, I would say 19 verses, he is explaining the real self. The master is explaining the real self in a different ways. And every time he is explaining means the seeker is listening. So when you listen by the ears, then you practice by the mind with love. That is faith. So what happens? We reach to an awakening. Is the master answering the question? Yes. The master is answering the question indirectly. He is answering to him who is a seeker. And in the second chapter, it's the most beautiful. It's an aha moment. It's a wow moment that how that seeker, after listening, narrates his experiences. So I'm not going into the second chapter, so I'll take up one more verse from the Shankara. He says, Name dvesh rago name lobha moho madho naiva meneva matsarya bhava na dharmo na chartho na kamo na moksha chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. Beautiful. It says, I'm not taking care of any religion, profession, dharmo, na chartho, na kamo, na moksha. I damn care all kinds of pleasure coming from outside. Why? Because I'm settled in permanent happiness within. That is the experience of the seeker. He gets the answer of all the three questions. Name dvesha rago, name lobha moho. That's another beautiful line. It's in Name dvesha rago, name lobha moho. Am I attached? So you check yourself with it. No, I'm not attached. Am I detached? No. Attachment and detachment is also not there in that state of the consciousness. Name dvesha rago, name lobha moho. Is the greed there? No. Greed comes from the attachment. Is the delusion there? No. Name dvesha rago, name lobha moho, madho naiva meneva matsarya bhava. What's the Samba saying? Is the ego senses there? No. I don't see that I-ness inside. That is the higher, awakened, meditative state. Name dvesha rago, name lobha moho, madho naiva meneva matsarya bhava. And then the master explains, this is what the experience is. Na dharmo, na chartho, na kamo, na moksha. In that state of meditation, means the highest state of meditation, even seeker even does not want that awakening because he is already there. You are in your house and you ask, if I ask you how long it will take you to reach to your house, you are already there. So will you seek to reach to your house? No. So that is the another highest point. You see, the supra-intellectual inquiry is required. But supra-intellectual inquiry does not take place by IQ, by a simple intellect. You don't need to gain, I don't know, you guys knows that IQ score. You don't need any IQ score. So you see that what he's saying? Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. Then who am I? I am absolute existence, consciousness, bliss. First he says what I am not, and then he says what is left. That is what I am. What is desired, that I am. But first let me take care what is not desired and throw it out of my system, from my consciousness, from the individual consciousness. And then we reach to that state. That is why the master is using the word ekam sarvagatam vyoma. I am inside and outside. This body is like a jar. Body is like a jar. Yes. Na sukham na dukkham. Then the master says, I am neither pain and nor pleasure, because I have seen. What I have seen? There is a constant vicious cycle of the pain and the pleasure. When there is a pleasure, I forget the pain, but pain is hidden there. Why the pain is hidden there? The pleasure is short-lived. Once the pleasure disappears, my mind is either fearful or it tries to repeat the same pleasure. So there is a cycle of pain and pleasure. There is a cycle of sorrow and happiness. There is a cycle of ego and not ego. Where it happens? In the mind. When the mind becomes the seeker, it purified. And in that purified state of the mirror, we reach to that state. This is what the 20th verse is. So be ready to go for the next. How the seeker, the highest level of the seeker, explains what is his experience after listening to the teacher. I am not that Astavakra. You may be like Janaka the seeker, but I'm conveying that message. So we will follow it next week. What should be our experiences? It's a kind of learning. So it is not that you should copy what he is saying, but I should find out whether I'm living into that state all the time or not. So let us start our journey